closing in on mid-November, honestly. And I had started this book, Curious Tides by Pascale Lacelle, in that video, which we will talk about in the second half of this video. This video is going to be done in two clips. This first clip, I am going to be asking you for an opinion. This, I don't believe, will come with like a community post poll. It might, but I'm just going to use the comments. I need to decide which book to read next. Both of these books have like good parts about them that I would really like to read them for, but this book is a lot more relaxing. I'm not really in the mood for it right now, but winter is just around the corner, so possibly this book is a lot more action-packed. I'm much more in the mood for it, and it is a book that I got quite a long time ago. One of my favorite series of books is the Powder Mage Saga by Brian McClellan, which is like right here on my bookshelf. And the first trilogy of that series ended with the book The Autumn Republic, and I had already read Promise of Blood and The Crimson Campaign, book 1 and book 2, but I was needing to wait until The Autumn Republic came out, so I was looking for something else, which ended up being Skyborn by David Dalglish. I went for it because A, the cover is kind of cool. I love an Orbit cover, and because it's from the publisher Orbit, which is the people who published the Powder Mage Saga. And I think maybe Brian McClellan's other book I'd have to check, but I was thinking, hey, I like this, and I did. It's just that I read way slower back then. This was still back in university when I was reading a book a year because I was just doing too much reading for university. This book, I got through maybe the first 4 or 5 chapters or so, and then The Autumn Republic came out, and it was all over for poor David Dalglish. And then I kind of just fell off reading again for a while until the pandemic, when I picked it back up when there was nothing to do and nothing to read for university. So I thought, I'll start reading for fun again. This book is quite good, if I remember it correctly. It would probably be a quicker read for me, just because I remember it not being like terribly challenging, which is not sort of saying anything about the book. I think that it is good to sometimes just have like a nice pulpy read every now and again. The back of the book says, 6 islands float high above the endless ocean where humanity's final remnants are locked in a brutal civil war. Their parents, slain in battle, twins Kale and Brenna Skyborn, are training to be Seraphim, elite soldiers of aerial combat who wield elements of ice, fire, stone, and lightning. When the invasion comes, they will take to the skies and claim their vengeance. I find this idea to be very, very compelling. I do like combat. I like a faster-paced novel. And I think this is the one that I'm leaning like 60% towards. Any higher, and I would probably just be filming a Start Another Book With Me video. But the other book is Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree, which is a prequel to Legends and Lattes, which I did enjoy. It didn't maybe end exactly the way that I wanted it to, but it was still competently written, and I think it was still well done. This book, I think, will be similar. I don't know if it maybe kind of retcons a little bit about the main character, but I don't necessarily mind that, especially when it is supposed to be a more relaxing, a more sort of low-stakes read. I do quite like the world that Travis Baldree has built. It is very Dungeons and Dragons. And I find that Legends and Lattes was very competently done. I just wish there was maybe more of it, and that the ending was slightly different. The this one, I'm gonna suspect that we'll end up the same way. Again, I'm like 40% on I should read this next, especially because winter is coming and it's got that like cozy curl up with a book kind of thing going on. On the back, it says, Viv is a young, battle-hungry orc, but her career with the notorious mercenary company Rackham's Ravens isn't going as planned. Wounded during the hunt for a powerful necromancer, she's packed off against her will to recuperate in the sleepy beach town of Merc, so far from the action that she worries she'll never be able to return to it. What's a thwarted soldier of fortune to do? Spend her hours at a beleaguered bookshop in the company of its foul-mouthed proprietor is the last thing Viv would have predicted, but it may be both exactly what she needs and the seed of changes she couldn't possibly imagine. Still, adventure isn't all that far away. A suspicious traveler in gray, a gnome with a chip on her shoulder, a summer fling, and an improbable number of skeletons prove Merc to be more eventful than Viv could have ever expected. Again, I just really like the character of Viv. I like the world and all that. So I think it would be like a fun, again, low bar kind of read. But again, I think I'm more in the mood for something faster paced. So we shall see. Please do comment. Tell me which one you think I should read. Tell me which one you would like me to do a starting a book video about. I am doing this because Curious Tides, I am not finishing. I am making the choice to not finish it after about 3 months. So, this is kind of getting a little bit into the review portion of this video. These 2 books I am going to commit to finishing, I think, because I will like them a lot more. But before I get into the review side of this video, first of all, my opinion is my opinion. Your opinion is your opinion. I fully respect that if you have read this book and you love it, I fully respect that. I'm happy for you. I can see kind of why you enjoy it. I think that there's potential here for a certain kind of audience. The next thing that I'm going to say is I am going to have some harsh words for the dark academia genre, sort of micro-genre in general, as well as harsh words for the book The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. Sorry if you could hear my house phone in the background, but moral of the story is I'm going to have some harsh words for The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake and the dark academia genre in general. And if you like those things, I respect you for it. This is 100% my opinion. We are all able here to respect each other's opinions, and if you would like to hear my opinions on it, awesome. If not, there are many other ASM artists out there. There are many other booktubers out there who have their own opinions and all that. So, please, let's be mature about it. I am going to be mature about it. I'm not going to call you an idiot if you like it. In fact, I can see why people like dark academia. It is just not for me. So, the 3 dark academia books that I have read are this, not finishing, A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, which I did not finish, and The Atlas 6, which I finished. I earnestly tried to read probably a good 2/3 of it, and then I skimmed the last third, because I just hated it. I hated it so much, and I think it goes to the idea of dark academia in general. I just don't think I sort of understand the energy. I find it to be filled with ennui. I find it to be filled with brooding. I find the plots move intensely slowly, and I find that the prose is, for my tastes, insufferable and pretentious and not necessarily wielded very well. That is my main complaint with Curious Tides. With Curious Tides, I find that the prose is unsure of itself. I find that the prose is oftentimes very not, it's not very well employed, and it is hideously is it hardly ever gets there, and when it does, it's just more questions. And I personally hate that style of writing, where it's just like there's more questions, and who knows, and everybody's a villain, and it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite. In fact, it's like my least favorite. But I hope I can sort of tell you why as I review the book. It's not that I find this book to be incompetent or awful. I mean, I think Pascale Lacelle definitely has their strengths as an author. They also have their weaknesses as an author as well. I would say, other than repetitive prose, I would say the greatest weakness is the character work here. There is a plot that is interesting here, but it takes far too long to get to it, and the characters are just the least compelling versions of themselves that they could be. And this gets into the repetition, which is the part that I'll talk about in this clip. In the next clip, I'll talk about the rest, but the repetition here has to do with this idea that the reader doesn't necessarily remember things. And I don't know where that comes from, but this is a good example. Emery, who is the main female protagonist, she is chronically unsure of herself and incredibly shy, which is fine. In the beginning, I feel her. It's just that by the halfway mark of the book, she is only beginning to slightly show some agency and slightly show a different side of her, which, for a book of this size, is just too little too late for me. It's probably every second chapter that it's every chapter, honestly, we are told in some way that Emery doesn't do social functions. Emery is a little bit shy. Emery is not outgoing. And we're told in different ways, but it's the same point over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. There are so many points in which either the inner monologue or in Emery's dialogue, there will be a mention of, well, I'm just so shy. Normally, I would try to run from a situation like this. Oh, if Romy were here, I'd definitely be a lot more social, but now that I'm by myself, I really don't have that sort of drive to be social. Or somebody is telling her, wow, I'm surprised, Emery, usually you're so shy. And it's like, I get it. I understand that Emery is an introvert. I understand that Emery is kind of only an introvert, and that's it. There's not much else to her. And there, again, like I said, begins to be shades of change within her character. It's just too little too late. Again, it's just like, you can't start showing your agency like halfway through the book, and even then it's being undermined by a male character. I'm not trying to say that Emery is an example of a weak female trope or anything like that. I just think that she falls victim to the usual portrayal of women in stories like these, where she is shy and drawn in and constantly outwitted by her male counterparts, and is in competition with her female counterparts, and or finds the other female characters annoying. The other thing is that there is a repetition of these sort of dynamics of, say, like, well, whenever Romy was around, I was way more outgoing. If Romy was here, I would definitely like being here. If Romy was this, if Romy was that. I understand that Romy was a good friend to Emery, and I understand that Romy changed Emery for the better. Romy is dead, however, and you can tell me once that Romy would make you more outgoing in one situation, and that's it. The big problem 200 pages worth of wording in here, and you would get roughly the same skeleton, and it would be told in a much more efficient way. I think that the wording used is fine. Sometimes sentences occasionally are just like they've got sort of a Yoda thing going on where it's just like, why did you arrange that like that? It's like syntactically it makes sense, I guess, but it's just, why did you write it like that? Especially not all of the characters speak in this way. For like, it's not quite like outsmart me, you did, but there are points in time where it's just like, ooh, that was an awkward sentence. Like, you could change that around or just strike it altogether. It's not writing that I respond to very well. I can understand how people like it, though. I can. It's just too brooding for me. It's too, everybody's an anti-hero, everyone's a villain, nobody's got good morals. It's just like, okay, I get it. Like, it's just odd. Emery is also, I would say, the most covertly thirsty person that I have ever read. For being so shy, she is turned the fuck on by, like, a lot of men. The two main ones, though, are Basil and Kieran. And Kieran can, like, do, like, the tiniest little smirk, and she is like, his smirk is disarming. His smirk makes me flush. His smirk makes my forehead hot. And again, this is said in like 3 different chapters, and we get it. Same thing with Basil. You could say, Basil's eyes disarm me immediately. Basil's eyes cause me to lose my composure. I get it. She's very horny, but she doesn't, like, say it. We're not told that she's lonely. We're not told that she's not romantically active. Like, it's just like, is this a romance subplot, or is she just horny? Like, what's going on here? Because it's not a will they, won't they. It's not a, is it going to be Basil, or is it going to be Kieran? It's literally just the most subtextual thing ever. Which, again, is a feature of dark academia. Usually these are incredibly slow burn type books. It's just, that's not for me. She is horny, though. It's weird in the most sort of like demure kind of like, no, I'm not, I swear kind of way. The other thing is that we are constantly told things, and then we have those things turn out to be complete lies. Not in a mystery kind of way, but in just a, oh, I thought that was different kind of way. For example, Romy, who is dead, is Emery's best friend, and Emery talks about Romy all the time, to the point where I would say Romy is the 3rd most important character in the book after Emery and Basil. But Emery talks about Romy so often, and that they were so close, and that they were tight, and everything was great. But then we are then told later that when they started at Aldrin College, Romy was like nowhere to be seen. She was cold, she was distant, she was making new friends and abandoning Emery. And it's like, well, that's not what you told us in the beginning. Unless I missed something, Romy and Emery were always tight. It's just that they had a slight pull apart in university, because that's just the nature of university. But instead, it's then kind of retroactively told to us as though that there's this great rift that's formed between Emery and Romy, which is just not how it was characterized in the beginning. The other main character, Basil, also falls victim to this, where the plot just kind of happens to him, even more so than Emery. And then in ways less so than Emery, it's odd, but he also has these moments of just like, I'm dark, I'm brooding, not a lot of people trust me because my magic is different, and all that kind of stuff. Again, I could retread it, but it's the same issue that Emery has in some ways. Basil does more stuff, but a lot more just straight up happens to him. Not a lot just straight up happens to Emery, and she she just doesn't ever kind of take hold of the agency like a main character should. I'm gonna end this clip here because I think I'm about to head out, but I will continue this in another clip, Okay, I'm back, but, anyway, sort of to end the conversation on agency, I find that, like, Emery does, anytime she takes an action in the story, it is undermined. She figures out that she has this cool tide collar magic that is breaking the mold of every magic ever. And then Basil swoops in to tell her, okay, you either keep it under wraps and under control, or I'm gonna make the police arrest you. And it's like, you literally should not have that motivation, Basil. You have been, like, told throughout the novel that the regulators are shady, and your father and your best friend are in an asylum, essentially, where it's like, okay, why are you all of a sudden a narc? Or, like, when she starts becoming outgoing and she wants to try to pull a fast one on Kieran, and she actually just, like, kind of has a moment of, like, wow, I didn't expect Emery to do that. I was actually shocked. And then turns out he's actually just pulled a larger fast one on her, and he almost gets her arrested, which is like, okay, cool. He's the one who wanted her to join the order in the first place. And there is another issue of repetition here where I think that, like, okay, so Emery has her own secret society that she needs to go and investigate. And then at some point, Basil is directed to another secret society, a different, completely other secret society. And the Institute and the regulators are kind of their own sort of shadowy organization with dubious morals. And it's just like, I think we have an oversaturation of ideas going on. And then partner that with the repetition, and partner that with, like, oh, Basil, there's a secret society you need to go to. And then he goes to it, and the ladies at the secret society say, oh, you need to break into the prison. And then he breaks into the prison with one of the ladies, and then the guy who he needs to see at the prison is like, you can't be here. And then the non-binary individual that knows Basil is like, you can't be here, get out of here while you still can. So then he leaves the magic jail, and then he cries on the way home, and then the lady is like, you should stay away. And then in a couple more chapters, they're like, okay, you need to sneak back into the magic prison. Okay, like, he does more, but it's all just told to him. With Emery, she takes a little bit more actual agency, but every time she tries, she is thwarted by a man. And I am not accusing Pascale Lacelle of, like, falling on tired tropes or, like, being misogynist in their writing or anything like that. I just find it odd that Emery is supposed to be coming into her own in this book, coming out of the shadow of Romy, yet she never does. She constantly talks about Romy, and at every turn where she is taking a little bit of agency for herself, again, it gets thwarted by a man. There is a further twist later in the book where, again, she is thwarted by Kieran. She is just being used as a toy, and it's just like, when can this poor woman get a fucking break? She can't, like, Basil literally tells her, you can't use her magic or else I'm gonna go fucking tell on you. And it's like, like, clearly magic is able to be controlled in this universe. And anyway, that gets me to more contradictions where it's like, okay, Basil is introduced to us as this sort of, like, brooding, reclusive, highly controlled, doesn't really give into his full potential because people born under the sign of the eclipse, or people born frivolously to break into a glass container. So does he care about using his magic when it doesn't, when, like, the time is not called for, when the time doesn't call for it? Or does he? Does he never use his magic frivolously, or does he sometimes when he chooses to? And it's like, well, it's because it's the manuscript of his favorite book, which becomes important later, but we don't know that. To me, it's just like, oh, he has this weird little character quirk where he's super excited about this fantasy novel. And the payoff isn't even like, oh, that's why he broke in. It's just like, okay, he finds a note from his sister in there, which is like, it does get something started, but it kind of just is like, oh, you have a note from your sister, you need to go see this secret society. And then the secret society is like, oh, you need to go break into the and then you get it. There's just a bloat to the book where it's just like, okay, we can shorten this if we need to. And again, this is me telling you that if you like this, I love it for you. I am under the impression that this is probably like decent dark academia fiction. It's certainly not the Atlas 6. The Atlas 6 is a complete and utter dumpster fire, but this is just like, it's boring. And that's the one thing that I'm like, I just can't deal with this. It's just filled with contradictions, and it's filled with repetition, and it just never goes anywhere. Halfway through the book, we're not even like really into what is supposed to be happening here. The other thing is that in these caves of Dovermere, where the college is built next to, on top of kind of, 8 kids died. Like 8 students of the college have like fully drowned and died, and yet there's not a cordon. They allow like a beach party to happen nearby. There's no like active investigation going on. It's just like, oh yeah, 8 fucking kids just died. Who gives a shit? It's like, huh? You're having a fucking luau barbecue where then one of those 8 kids washes up on the beach and then re-dies. And everyone's just like, oh my god, did you hear about that like kid who like washed up on the beach? He was apparently dead. And it's like, is there no investigation? Is there no like caution tape over the cave? Somebody please. Anyway. So, one of the other things is just this. There is one of I think the worst offender for repetition in phrasing is like, oh, Kieran said this, and suddenly Emery's blood turned to ice in her veins. Oh, it works once, but then when it's like, and suddenly her veins turned to ice, and suddenly her blood was filled with ice. Her blood was ice. It's just like, okay. I get that whatever was said made her nervous, but she can't always have fucking ice in her veins. I understand it's a metaphor, but it's like, can we find a different one to communicate the fact that she is nervous, or somebody did something that is different from what she expected? Please. Please. Anyway, there's just a lot that goes on. We're also told things a lot, and we're sometimes shown them, but we are told things over and over and over again. Emery quite likes the De Crescen's library, and almost every time they're there, it's like there was a comforting air to the De Crescen's library. There was something that had always comforted Emery about the De Crescen's library. The De Crescen's library's atmosphere was strangely calming. It's like, I get it. I understand. You can tell me that once, and then every time we return to it, you can just be like, oh, they were in De Crescen's library, and I'm like, oh, right. That library is very comforting to Emery. Same thing with Obscura Hall. It's like Obscura Hall was like a Basil, and it's like, fucking please. I understand. Anyway, this book also has potential. I know, I've been very negative, but this book does have genuinely a good sort of base to it, where the magic system is truthfully quite interesting. The magic system is quite sort of, it's a good mix of sort of like hard rules and sort of like a little bit of nebulousness to it, where your magic is determined by what sign of the moon it was when you were born and how the tides were. So if you were born under the new moon at high tide, you have this power. If you were born during the new moon at low tide, you have this power. And most of these powers are quite unique. If you were born during a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse, there's a lot more variety in the powers that you can have, and your magic is a lot more unstable, but it's more powerful usually. That's why they're at risk of collapsing kind of explosively, and that's what happened to Basil's father and Basil's best friend. But like, most of this magic is not like shooting lightning or like chucking fireballs and shit like that. It's a lot of like, it's basically support roles. There are people who can grow plants really well. There are people who are really persuasive. There are people who can control dreams. There are straight up healers. There are people who can control shadows. There are people who can control light. There's even this class of people called reapers, and they don't cause death, although they can, but they're more focused on like the ends of cycles. So like causing a tree's leaves to change color, having like a crop in the height of summer and then accelerating it to harvest time, that kind of thing. They are very obsessed with cycles, which I think is really interesting. The only thing is that this just never gets explored. Romy is a healer, which is just already the most straightforward, pretty much, of all of the magics, which is fine. But it just doesn't leave a lot of room, and then eventually you find out that she's a tide caller, which is like essentially a mythic kind of type of thing that you can be. There's never ever been one, apparently. Well, like that's what the characters believe, but like she's remarkable for this. She can use all the different kinds of magic, and she can use them at whim, because the other thing is like, if it's the new moon and you were born under the sign of the new moon, you can use your magic freely. If it's the full moon, though, you need to bloodlet to use your magic, which is interesting. Like, it's sacrificial. It's very like, there's a price to pay for this magic, which I think is kind of a thesis statement of the book, is that there is a price to pay for power, and I think that literally having to bloodlet for that is an interesting metaphor for like, you're literally shedding your own blood in order to secure some sort of power. Interesting. But again, it just never goes anywhere, because immediately as Emery figures out, you know what, you can use all of the magic and you don't have to bloodlet, Basil is immediately like, if you ever fucking let yourself use that magic, I'm gonna report you to the authorities and you're gonna get fucking arrested and your magic taken away from you. And it's like, holy fucking shit, dude. Like, you don't even know what she's capable of. And it's like, you're constantly, and the threat to Romy for a long time is just like, we're gonna report you to the dean, we're gonna report you to the regulators. And like, when she's at the secret society meeting, they're like, oh, we're gonna take you to the regulators, we're gonna take you to the institute. And it's just like, okay, can we move on from this? Because clearly it's not gonna happen. And like, even then, it's just like, Basil has no reason to trust that institute. And we learn that later on, and it's just like, why is he so obsessed with sending her to the institute if he has no reason to actually trust it? But you can see where the potential comes in, where it's like, oh, this is a cool magic system. Emery is literally a once-in-a-species this magic. It's just that it doesn't ever get properly explored. Honestly, I would have fucking loved it if when she went to the party for the Selenic Order and it was revealed that Kieran kind of like tricked her, if she was just like, you know what, fuck it, and she just went ape shit even more than she did. And then the whole thing is like about her sort of uncovering why it is that someone like her is such an anomaly, and like what it means to be someone like her, and then like you get it, but it's just like, why? And then the fact that there's like a couple different secret societies in the book is just like, okay, we're muddying the water. I can't remember the one name versus the other, and then the one is like, it is a secret society, but it just turns out that all of Kieran's friends are members of it, which is understandable, but it's also just like, well, that's convenient. And they're all like kind of, and it's just like, okay, I get it. There's one member of Kieran's friend group that is very dark academia, and he's very just like, my dear, as long as there's wine, we're fine. And it's just like, shut the fuck up. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot going for the book. It's just, it doesn't ever make it to the point where it's like, oh yeah, this is interesting. I can sink my teeth into this. And I think that's kind of the worst thing that it does for myself. Now, I understand that most of what I have talked about is somebody's favorite. Like, I can see why the flowery prose, I can see why the repetition, I can see why the brooding, I can see why the mood, I can see why the magic system is very enthralling, because it is. It has the potential to be. It just is like, okay, I guess we're done with that. Unless it comes back up later, but again, it's just like halfway through the book, I started skimming, and as I started skimming, it was just like, this goes absolutely nowhere, and Emery fails to ever really capture any agency. And like, the only sort of interesting thing that starts getting uncovered with Basil is like what they do to inmates at the Institute, but it was just too little too late. Like, it's just like, I couldn't finish it, so that's why I decided to petition all of you about which book to start next, because I am likely going to skim a little bit more of Curious Tides, just so that I can get to the end of it and just kind of get an idea of what goes on. It's just like, I've got no desire to continue reading it in earnest, though, so we shall figure out between Bookshops and Bone Dust and Skyborn which one I should dive into. Sorry, I just had to like stop for a second, but another thing that's, I think, has a lot of potential about the book is that like Emery is written in, I would say, a naturalistic way. She feels very young university student. She feels quite like the introvertedness is true to life. Like, there is a reality to an introverted friend having an extroverted friend who then makes that person extroverted, and then losing that person is obviously a huge sort of vacancy. And honestly, I think that the grieving is of Romy specifically is very well done in this novel, where there truly does feel like a character that is absent. We never ever met Romy when she was alive in the fiction. There are flashbacks, but the because it's interesting because Basil is Romy's brother and Emery is, of course, Romy's best friend. So they are able to kind of like almost say compare notes in a way of like, this is how it feels for her to not be here. And then by extension, there's miscommunications and there's sort of the messiness of grieving and the fact that it can make you act in ways that seem illogical. For example, Emery didn't attend Romy's memorial service held by her family. And at first you're like, that's bizarre. But then it's also like, well, for this heavily introverted girl who went through this incredibly traumatic experience, which she kind of blames herself for, is just like, you know, that's probably how someone like Emery would grieve for someone like Romy, and then somebody like Basil would obviously be like, well, did you even ever care about her? And it causes good tension. It causes good tension. And I think that's what kept me reading the book for so long. Like, reading it in earnest was just like, there are glimpses of, I get it. I understand what's going on here. Even in that odd horniness that I mentioned, where like Emery is an introverted person, and through that I am inferring, and I may be giving a little bit of maybe I'm being a bit generous, but I notice that, like, well, if she is such an introvert, you could logically expect that her romantic sort of exploits are not necessarily very, like, she doesn't have many of them, if any. So yeah, when you see, like, when you've had a couple of sips of wine and one of Kieran's friends is kind of a smooth talker, it's just like, well, you know, if I've had maybe a couple of glasses and there's like a handsome, charismatic man over there, I'd be like, hi. Or if I had like a particularly attractive friend or something like that, like a Basil figure in my life or something, and like, sometimes it is the little things that you notice, like the little smirk. Often it'll be like, Emery's eyes lingered on his smirk for just a second too long. And it's like, oh yeah, I think an introvert maybe would have experiences like that. So there's meat there. There's something there. I just want there to be more. I just want there to be more of that and less of the Emery's shy. If Romy were here, I'm looking at his smile all day. Oh, I'm blushing. Oh, he got one over on me. Oh, you need to go to the secret society. Actually, you need to leave the secret society. Actually, we need to go back and sneak into the secret society. Like, less of the bloat and more of that sort of like granular character work. I would be perfectly happy if this book was just like, what happened to Romy and what's up with Emery's magic, and it was 200 pages less. It was close to the 300 page mark, and it was just that like minute character work and her doggedly trying to figure out what the fuck went on. And then at the end of the novel, she figures out the Hellenic Order stuff, and then the next book is like the secret society stuff and the lost epilogue, and maybe Basil's thing is all about finding like who's related to the lost epilogue, and can I find the lost epilogue of this, and maybe my father or maybe Kai has something to do with it. But I don't know, there's too many ideas going on, and it, I think, all just gets muddled, and then there's no movement really until, say, the back half of the book, and it's just like, well, this is pointless for me. Yeah, I think in terms of recommending it, if I cannot recommend it personally, if you are a person who is not maybe a Dark Academia fan, I don't know if there's much there for you. If you are a Dark Academia fan, if you like brooding, if you like fog, if you like rain, if you like the lunar cycle and the alignment of the tides, and she must cut her palm in order to access the power of her moon. Like, that shit is rife in this book. There is like over descriptions of fucking everything, and like, oh, the history of the world, that the shadow was oppressed by the gods of the tides, and the tides shall return, and the moon shall be. It's like, it's all that. If you like that, this book is a really good rainy spring read. It's just, it ain't for me personally. But yeah, I think, you know what, I'm really proud of this video. I'm really proud of it. I had a couple hiccups in filming. I lost a little bit of footage here and there, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. I really like doing book reviews. It's really tempting me to do like a book thing, like a book channel or something like that. Excuse me. Oh dear. Excuse me, really. Hiccup turned into... oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Hiccup turned into a burp, turned into like the huge throat gurgle. But, I really like doing this. Again, it's tempting to do some sort of like book channel kind of thing. But, yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Please talk to me in the comments about things. I think that we can have a really good like conversation about people, especially if there are people who like Dark Academia. I want you to give me the lowdown on like what the appeal is, because I don't know if I'll ever give it a try again. But the Atlas 6 was such an epic dumpster fire that like, would I read the second book? Possibly. It's just that bad where it's just like I kind of have to see it through at some point in my life. There's also a review of the Atlas 6 bouncing around in my brain, so if anybody ever wants to see another negative review, I gotcha.